It's the thriller in Manila. Jesus Christ versus every man's killer. Sin and death's got the whole world getting iller. But I praise God for the blood spiller. It's the thriller in Manila. Jesus Christ versus every man's killer. Sin and death's got the whole world getting iller. But I praise God for the blood spiller.
Okay, threat level theology. We're going to get into some interesting stuff tonight, and I'm really excited to talk about it because I haven't talked about this type of stuff. Now, our youth ministry, We Are One, we had a youth and adult ministry, We Are One, we had a summer camp that we put on, and we talked through a topic that is very interesting for summer camp. Most people wouldn't have thought that a ministry nowadays would be putting on a summer camp solely with the theme of apologetics. And for a while, I grew up and I disliked the idea of apologetics because I really liked it, but there's a sense of me that disliked it. And there's a person in our ministry who we were talking about the same thing. It's just to argue with people. And the more I've studied, the more I've learned. First, I like it. It's my hobby. It's actually like something that like I really enjoy. But it's also like understanding that we are the people who are supposed to provide answers, not only just for other people, but we're supposed to be solidified in our faith. And theology and an apologetic framework go hand in hand because it's not just how we understand the basis and the knowing of God, the Greek word gnosis of God, but it's also our, like that Greek word, I threw that in there. That's just to make me sound smart. I don't actually know anything, okay? But it's not just understanding God and knowing him, but it's also understanding what a world without him would be like. And it helps me kind of process the culture and be able to see into the ways that people think, the way that they process, especially in a world and in a worldview that is absent of a God framework. You know, we live in a society, in a secular society, absent of a godly framework. And so when we put together our understanding and our not just our worldview, but we project our worldview on other people and we say, here's why you should believe it. We're not only trying to just show them what we think is good, we're trying to dismantle in a kind and loving way the thought process that you have will lead you nowhere, not only to an eternal place of darkness and of gnashing of teeth, hell, Gehenna. Not only will it lead you there, but here on earth, eternity begins now, and you're already living in a place devoid of hope, devoid of any meaning and any purpose, and that's what the current culture gives them. And it's almost kind of like not a salesman tactic, but it's almost kind of like, here's what I have, here's what God has given me, what do you have in your hands? And so that's why I still think this idea of apologetics is so important, and we're going to mix some theology and apologetics together. It's going to be kind of like a big mix match of things, and we're going to talk about it because I think this is also an opportunity for you to be able to say, like, here's kind of what I believe, here's what I could formulate, and we're going to get deep tonight, okay? This is supposed to be a class for us to not only just kind of like take in information and, you know, maybe eat your food while you're watching. I know you're doing that, okay? I know you're eating your food while you're watching, you're doing whatever. That's fine. But it's also a place for you to be able to digest not just the food that you're eating while you're watching this YouTube video, but to digest the information. I think that's so important for us. And so we're ready to learn. We're ready to get into it. We're going to start us off with some church history because church history is amazing. Church history is one of the coolest things because I'm a citizen not only of America, and I learn American history. I learn about Lewis and Clark, and I learn about the Alamo. I remember the Alamo, okay? Remember the Alamo. If you leave with anything, remember the Alamo. But I'm a citizen of heaven. I'm a kingdom citizen. And so understanding how the kingdom has operated for the last 2,000 years is paramount, is so important. It is so important to not just understand how the first Christians in the apostolic age in the book of Acts understood what it meant to follow Jesus, but how that played out through the centuries, how they went wrong, how it went on a tangent and how it focused too much on this thing, and how maybe we can remind ourselves of, wow, the beauty of the way that people have done it in the past. Just kind of take that in. So I'm gonna present to you my boy, the one, the only. We're gonna get into church history. I'm gonna explain some of the stuff that he did. One of the greats of all time, Thomas Aquinas. Now, if you've never heard of Thomas Aquinas, if you want to talk about the literal brainiac of Christianity, like big brain. The reason his head's shaved on top is because it can't even contain how massive his mind is. Okay, that's actually untrue. That was like they would remove that to like say that, Lord, like there's nothing even covering my mind from you. Okay, that was like it was more of a stylistic thing. It was a symbolic thing. But let's just say it's because he's got a giant brain, right? Let's say he's got a mind on him, dude. Thomas Aquinas was one of the most prolific thinkers of the Christian age. People who'd be like, I'm an atheist because Christians are dumb. I just say you haven't read Thomas Aquinas, and you don't really genuinely know how influential he just is to the Christian faith, but how influential he is to the understanding of just so many modern philosophies. He's influenced so many things. When people talk about Thomas Aquinas, they'll say like Thomistic thought, right? Thomas being his name, Aquinas actually being where he's from. The name Thomas Aquinas, he's from a place called Aquino. So that's why they called him Thomas Aquinas. His last name isn't Aquinas. I don't actually know what his last name is, if they had last names in that way. But Thomas Aquinas, he lived around 1226. They believe he was born 1226, 1224, and he lived till 1274. And he was an amazing man. We disagree on some things when it comes to specific Christian theologies. We disagree on some things when it comes to the way certain sacramental theologies and the way that we operate here as a church. We can disagree, but we agree on the fundamentals, which is that Jesus Christ is Lord, and that we are here to serve him. We're here to live in following him in our lives. And he's just so influential, and he's just a powerhouse, man, especially when it comes to understanding apologetics and making the case for our faith, because an apologetic wasn't just an important thing for us today. We can have an apologetic. We always think apologetic is like, I'm going to prove God to you, but there's so many different things. It's about defending what I believe, even down to some of the nuances of the things I believe. We are, a lot of the times, the people who stand between our beliefs and the ability for other people to retain them. And so a lot of people, when they come to you, for me specifically as a pastor, but also for you, they'll ask you the question, and they'll either, if you can't answer, they'll ask two things, or they'll judge two things. One, your position is wrong, or two, you're ignorant to it. And I would make this claim. John Lennox, he makes this claim. He's a very famous theologian and a professor, and he said, if you don't understand your point, or if you can't articulately clarify your point, you either, one, don't understand it, or two, don't believe it. I think that's so powerful, because a lot of times we say we believe it, but if we can't articulate it, we can't live it out, it's very hard for us to prove that we actually believe it. Or we just don't understand what we believe. And so if you don't understand what you believe, sometimes it's also hard for you to fully live out that belief. Not all the time, but sometimes. And so back to Thomas Aquinas. He was called the common doctor. Doctor meaning he was the one who established so much doctrine in the church. And I like your cut, G. That's what they say. Amazing. He is. Like, we should bring that back, right? Right? If someone's got like male pattern baldness, as you could see, like he was getting bald. That's why he's got like the weird like little tuft right in the center. But we should bring that back, yo. The dumb ox was one of his nicknames, because he was so like quiet in his university. He would just kind of sit there, and his fellow students, who were impressed by his immense size, because he was a big boy, dude. He would have been like linebacker, dude, back in the day. Immense size and quiet demeanor. They called him a dumb ox. But little did they know that Thomas Aquinas would be one of the most prolific Christian thinkers, putting him down, bro. Now, he's a big boy, but he's a big thinker, okay? Let's unite. Let's go, okay? So he would go on to become one of the greatest theologians and philosophers of the day, and he wrote one of the most prolific works called the Summa Theologica, okay? If you don't know what that is, that's okay. It's a volume about this big. It's huge, dude. It's massive, and it's just a beast mode of getting through. Pastor Steve was like teasing me because I like to read theological works. He goes, oh yeah, this guy reads Thomas Aquinas. I'm like, dude, I don't think you understand. Reading Thomas Aquinas is very, very hard to do. But if you have a specific thing that you're kind of like working through or trying to articulate it, Thomas Aquinas can articulate so much. One of his biggest things, we're not going to talk about this today, one of the biggest things that Thomas Aquinas did was he kind of merged this medieval thought of faith and reason, because understanding reason was a very, very powerful tool, especially back in the medieval age, in the 1200s, when it came to Aristotle thought or Aristotelian thought, which is like logic and reason, and Platonian thought, which is Plato. So all these famous philosophers who had influenced so much of the Western age, and then how do we take these Western philosophers who talked so much about reason, and then we have this faith? It seems like there's this gap between reason and faith, and Thomas Aquinas said, no, my child, we will put these two together, and they work seamlessly. They're like brother and sister, hand in hand. Faith and reason go hand in hand. That just because you have faith doesn't mean that you are unreasonable, and just because you're unreasonable, or just you're unreasonable, sometimes you're unreasonable, just because you have an emphasis on reason doesn't mean that you also are abandoning faith. And he takes these two and he puts them together, he melds them together, and it was so prolific and it was so powerful to our formation of our thought today, right? We as Christians wouldn't say that we're unreasonable by our faith. Our faith isn't dumb. Sometimes to the world it looks insane, but there is reason behind everything that God does. God gives us reason. He gives us a rational mind to be able to understand. If things are logical, that's how we can parse out things. That's how we can understand things. We trust our reason and our logic. And so how do we get a hold of this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of Thomas Aquinas' thoughts and his works, and we're not going to really talk as much about faith and reason, but we're going to extrapolate one of his most prolific apologetics. And we're going to look at one of his most famous arguments, and it's a very famous argument for the existence of God. Like I said, this one's going to get a little deep, so if you need me to like repeat something, put it in the chat or something like that, or just comment below and rewatch it, okay? We're going to get into Thomas Aquinas' famous, what is called the cosmological argument. Cosmological argument. Now, the cosmological argument is an argument for the proofs of the existence of God. He calls it his 5 proofs for the existence of God. The cosmological argument is a combination of some of these proofs, and you can look at these proofs in the beginning of his Summa Theologica. He kind of like lays it out, and the way Thomas Aquinas writes is he'll write like objection, and then he'll write like someone will say something, and then he'll respond to those objections, and he'll say, but what about this? And he's like so smart because he'll like work through those. It's like watching someone debate themselves. That's kind of how he works. He's not just like bleh. It's not just words thrown up on a page. It's very like textbook, like here's how we do it. Okay, so he does that, and he makes his argument for the existence of God. And he's responding to another famous argument by the student named Anselm. We don't have to get into Anselm. We don't have to get into Anselm. We don't have to talk about him. You can look him up. His famous argument is called the ontological argument. And Thomas Aquinas is like, yo, that's okay. I like the ontological argument. It's all right, but I don't believe in it fully. I think my arguments for the existence of God are better. We both believe in God. I just think when I use my logic and deductive reasoning and my understanding, I can come together with some great arguments. So he does with this cosmological argument of the existence of God. And this is what we would call an a priori argument. Now, I'm hitting you with some what's this called? Some like themes and some topics. I'm hitting you with not just like my thoughts. Like this is like class. So go to work, take some notes or something. Record this, take a picture on your phone, screenshot it, whatever you need to do. A priori. What in the world, PT, you talking about? A priori. A priori argument is an argument through deduction and reasoning and not just through lived experience and measurable data. For example, if I'm driving and I see one of the ways that someone makes this claim for an a priori argument, correct me if I'm wrong, but an a priori argument would be something like I'm driving down the road and I see smoke. And so deducing the reason that smoke is there could be an a priori argument, or it's an argument maybe not necessarily through something that I can see or I can understand, but it's through deducing things. It's through working a priori, which means like before the understanding the experience. And so I might not be able to make this argument based off of lived experience or measurable data. So that's this type of argument is. He's saying, like, listen, I'm not going to make this argument because I personally can show you, like, look, there's God, and you turn around and, like, Jesus is standing there. He's like, yo, it's me, like he did with the disciples. The disciples, they didn't have an a priori argument. They were like, I was there, dog. I saw him. Thomas, doubting Thomas, not Thomas Aquinas. He's like, he touched him. He's like, yo, you feel? Let's have some broiled fish. Okay, so if you don't know what that is, go look at the incarnation, the threat level theology of the incarnation. But Jesus shows up. They saw it with their eyes. It wasn't just something that they had to deduce. But now, Jesus actually mentions this. He says, blessed will be those who believe and do not see. We don't get to see the same way that the apostles and the disciples did back in the day. We have to deduce through a priori arguments, through honestly our understanding of the Word, the historicity of the Bible. We have to deduce through these means and these methods. And he makes 5 proofs, what he would call, for the existence of God. And I'm going to give these to you, and then we're going to kind of like parse them out and break them down, okay? If you're following with me, which of his books do I recommend? Says one of the chats. Oh, man. I would recommend, if you have a thought on something, that you Google. I'll put down below. I'll put in the description after the live stream right now. That you Google Thomas Aquinas on, because his works are literally like, he has so many. He's written so much, and it's very difficult to kind of like extrapolate out, and sometimes. But that would be my best recommendation for you in the chat. Okay, let's look at the 5 proofs for the existence of God. Now, first, before we do that, I do want to kind of like explain some of the background. Okay, now I've already explained some of the background, but I want to kind of just give us some context going into this. Some people think that these arguments are faulty. We'll look at this and we'll talk about it. I think these arguments are very powerful, especially the first and second one. I think they're very, very powerful. And people usually, when they try and break down these arguments, it's based off of a skepticism framework. It's easy to throw an egg. It's hard to lay an egg, is a phrase I heard. So it's easy to try and tear down an argument without actually presenting any sort of counterclaim, or without actually presenting any sort of thing that could fill that gap. Now, we don't believe that God is just here to fill gaps, but genuinely we can deduce from looking at our universe and looking at the things in the world, we can deduce that these proofs, in my opinion, come to a very good conclusion as to why God is here, why he's real. These don't answer the question, does the Christian God, is he real? Is Yahweh real? Now, later, Thomas Aquinas, he does talk about this, and I obviously believe it. You could read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, a phenomenal book where he can break down this more. But this is just getting us to the first step for people who don't believe in God. This is getting us to the step of, is God real? Is he out there? Is there a God? And I think we have to get to that step. And usually when people get to that step, they go to Christianity, because C.S. Lewis said it's the manliest of all religions. Not meaning that you obviously don't have the feminine side in it, but he's saying it can stand up for itself. It's not a wimpy, sissy religion. And so I love that. I love that. So let's look at the 5 proofs, and we'll kind of dive into them more. First proof, 5 proofs. This is called cosmological argument, okay? The first one is the argument from motion. Second one, argument from efficient cause, argument from possibility and necessity, argument from degrees, and argument from intelligence. Okay, you're probably going, dude, I don't know what the heck he's saying. That's okay. That is okay. We'll break it down. We'll kind of get into it. Let's first look at what it means, argument from motion. And every one of these 5 proofs, I just had to like spice up these 5 proofs, and how I did that is I got these AI generated images of Thomas Aquinas. And I just thought it'd be funny because I have to just kind of spice it up. So here's obviously Thomas Aquinas with giant muscles. Okay, let's get into the proofs. 5 proofs. Okay, for the first one, when we look at the argument for motion, this is like, I believe, one of his most powerful arguments. And the idea is this. Everything in existence has been put into motion. And when we look at just the outside world in general, okay? People in the chat were saying Tommy Guns, okay? That's Tommy Guns. Let's look at him again, right here. Look at that boy, dude, okay? Swole, bro, gym bro. Okay, so what he's saying is everything in the world has movement, right? The earth is spinning. People even say, like, the Big Bang happened, and then it hit this, and it hit this, and over time, this moved, and this hit, and this hit, and this hit. What we see is there's this, like, you can just, like, turn your clock backwards and rewind time. You can see that the reason why this thing is here is because something put it there, something hit it. And we can see that there's cause and effect when it comes to motion, that things are moving because other things moved, and things just don't move on their own. They're moving because other things are moving. And what Thomas Aquinas says in the Summa is, he says that we can't go rewind time all the way back and just see that there's consistently things hitting another. You see these blocks right here, right? So we start at this last block, and this last block is moving because the second to last block hit it, and that one's moving because the third to last one hit it, and the fourth, and we just keep going back into infinity. He said this is what we call an infinite regress, and you can't get to an infinite regress. Now people would say, oh, you can. We'll deal with that in a sec. But everything that's put into motion must have been put into motion by another. So if you were born because there was a parents who had more parents, and those parents and these parents, and the earth is spinning because something made it spin. It got caught in the sun's gravitational pull, right? And so now it's moving and it's moving. It seems like it's been moving for forever, but we know scientifically, and this is even before Thomas Aquinas fully knew this, we know scientifically that the universe is not eternal. The universe had a beginning, and that beginning had to have been caused by some mover. And so Thomas Aquinas said this. He made this claim. Now, reminder, let's just focus in. This is going to be a little tough. We'll get through it, but it's going to be really good. If that by which it is put into motion be itself put in motion, then this also must needs be put in motion by another. Must needs. There's some old school right there. And that by another again. So what he's saying is you can't just something can't just put itself into motion. It must be put into motion by something, and then that something was put into motion by something before it. But this cannot go on for infinity, because then there would be no first mover, and consequently no other mover, seeing that subsequent movers move only inasmuch as they are put into motion by the first mover. So I have been put into motion because there was a mover before me and a mover before me, but there had to have been a first mover, okay? There had to have been put in a first mover, and he makes this analogy. As the staff moves only because it is put into motion by the hand. But eventually the hand had to have, although the hand is the one who is motioning the staff, right? Something needed to have moved the hand, and something before that needed to have moved the body, and before that, and before that. And you can rewind time, and once you rewind time all the way completely back, you'll find that you need an unmoved mover. You need what he would call an unmoved mover. It's a necessity to arrive at a first mover put into motion by no other, and this everyone understands to be God. To be God. So he would say this: the start of the chain, like you look at dominoes, right? No one sees dominoes falling over and say, oh, I bet those dominoes were falling over for infinity. No, they say there had to have been a start to that falling from the very beginning. There had to have been the original unmoved mover who started the motion. Now, for us, if I knock the blocks down, I have been moved prior to those blocks. But eventually, when we rewind time all the way back to the beginning, there had to have been something who moved the universe. And this would be called the unmoved mover. Why does he have to be unmoved? We'll get into that in a sec. But there's people who claim, oh, well, the cause of the universe, the cause of the universe is the Big Bang. I don't like this religion stuff, all this type of stuff, which I think is really funny because they're not really answering the question. They're just posing the answer by asking another, or by avoiding another question. For example, if I asked you who ate the cookies, I put cookies out, bro. We were literally saving that. We're going to Friendsgiving. I put these cookies out. All of a sudden, I look, they're gone. Who ate the cookies? You got crumbs all over your face, dude. You got crumbs all over. Who ate these cookies? And you look and you say, they were eaten. You'd be like, okay, I understand they were eaten. Who ate them? How did they leave? Well, they're gone. Yeah, I understand, dog. Just tell me how. I don't need to know how they were eaten. I need to know who ate them. And the question would be analogous to this. How did everything start? How did the Big Bang bang? How did it blow up? Well, no, the start of the universe was the Big Bang. I think that people who claim that the start of the universe is the Big Bang, sure, that's fine. But I don't honestly care about how it happened. I care about what made it do. Well, there was fission happening. I don't know if it's actually fission, but there was things happening prior to the Big Bang that caused it. Okay, who caused those things? Who caused those things to happen? What caused those things to thing, and then to eventually explode into everything? What caused those things? And first, I just love that they fail to understand the Big Bang is a theistic argument. Did you know that the Big Bang was the theory was created by a Catholic priest in 1931, which is hilarious, right? Because he himself understood that you need an unmoved mover to move, right? Who started this movement? Who ate the cookies? The cookies were eaten. Yeah, dog, I know, but who ate them? And so what we're trying to ask is what started everything? Not just what started these things. What started everything? And what happens is if you don't have an unmoved mover, you fall into the trap of an infinite regress, which is, well, everything's just been. Now, there are plenty of people, atheists, who make this claim that it's fine for us to, have this idea of infinity because, we deal with infinity in mathematics. But there's a difference between infinity in mathematics as theoretical and infinity in real life, right? You could theoretically do an equation with an infinite amount of cookies, but in the end, someone ate my cookies. They're not infinite. And in order for it to be infinite, it doesn't just need to be infinite forward, it needs to be infinite backwards, right? And we have just as little proof to prove infinite backwards. We have less proof than an infinite God. And I love this. John Lennox, he asked this question in a debate with Richard Dawkins. When Dawkins posed this question, he goes, well, who created God then? Because the problem with your claim is you have this unmoved mover, but your whole premise is built on this idea that everything needs to be moved. So why does God get an exemption? Who moved God? And he responded, oh man, I love this. He responded, you believe the universe is your creator. And I would posit the same question to you. Who created your creator? And a lot of people are so satisfied with this answer that, well, the Big Bang happened. They're so satisfied even with the answer that everything's been around for forever. They're so satisfied with this idea of eternity when it meets their desires, but they're not satisfied with the idea of eternity when it's a being like God. They would be fine, legitimately, most atheists would be totally fine with, not all, but a lot of them would be fine with the cognitive understanding that the universe has just gone on forever, or maybe not the universe has gone on forever, but the things that make up the universe have gone on for forever. Matter has just always been around. They're fine with that. So eternity is not the problem. The problem is they don't like God. And I think that that's the issue. Because if you counter with this, well, then who created God? The answer is either the universe is eternal or it's created. Okay, so the universe is either eternal or it's created. If it's created, it must have an unmoved mover as its creator. The first mover who moved everything. And if it's eternal, why is it so conceivable to understand an eternal universe that created you, but not a eternal God who created you? You tell me why one is crazier than the other. It's not. C.S. Lewis says that everyone needs a miracle, and everyone needs at least one miracle. I love that idea. And so we have our miracles. Our miracles not only is the miracle of creation, but it's the miracle of the resurrection. We have our miracles, but everyone will need a miracle because somehow this stuff had to come into being, right? It had to come from somewhere. And they're just saying it miraculously was. And so everyone needs that miracle. Atheists, they can have their miracle. But Thomas Aquinas, he ain't having it. As you look at him, look at this buff dude. Because we're about to get into proof number 2. Proof number 2. What are these balloons? I think when I do this, it does that. No way. Look at that, dude. What about thumbs up? Oh! Yo! I love that. I love it. Is Mad Love on here? No? Just peace? Wow. That is crazy. That's like a new Mac feature. I've learned that for the first time. That's crazy. Okay, back to what we were talking about. Okay, Thomas Aquinas buff. Okay, that's awesome. Now let's go to the second one of the 5 proofs. Let's get into it. Argument from efficient cause. Now you're looking at this and you're just like, efficient cause. Dude, I don't need to know what this is. We'll explain it. So just hold your horses and just look at Thomas Aquinas as a Starbucks barista handing you your Starbucks. I'll have an iced chai with sweet cold foam light ice. My wife, she'll have a same thing, grande, okay, light ice on hers as well. I would do no ice, but they charge more, which is crazy nowadays. But Thomas Aquinas, he's handing us this. So take a drink, take a swig, because we're about to get into proof number 2, argument from efficient cause. What's efficient cause mean? More balloons. More balloons, okay? What's efficient cause mean? Efficient cause is, the idea is that the universe can't be the cause of itself. It's very similar to the first one, right? The first argument is from motion, the idea that the things can't move themselves, but also there are other causes in the earth or in the world that are more than just physically moving things. I think that I should go to McDonald's because I'm hungry. I think that I should not go to McDonald's because I want to be healthy. I think that I should do these things. You have these causes that are constantly moving and or that are pushing you to do things, and eventually there have to have been an initial cause. So this argument focuses less on moving the aspect of the physical world, more like a block falling, and more like the causes of things. Like, why did I drink coffee today? I drank coffee today, which is gross. This is just an analogy because coffee is disgusting, right? The reason I drank coffee today because I was thirsty, but I was thirsty because I'm a human, and I'm a human who drinks things because I need to drink to stay alive, right? And I would rather have coffee than water, okay? Because it has more caffeine. And I'm a human who drinks things. And from a human who drinks things, I'm a human because of my parents. My parents are humans because they're parents. And I get back to all these causes. Why is this happening? Because, right? Your parents be like, why do I got to clean my room? Cause, right? Well, there had to have been a cause. And the reason he makes this efficient cause, and the reason it's different, and this is really influenced by Aristotle. Okay, so if you don't have the framework of how Aristotle kind of thought, it would be very hard. This one kind of it makes sense, but it's a little more clunky than the argument from motion. When we look at someone who causes something, a being who creates a cause or who does something, I make this chair out of wood. I'm the causer. I'm outside of the thing that I've caused. And when we look at the world, we have to look at it from that perspective, that there is an outside causer, the first causer, and that's what he means by efficient causer. And this first causer created everything, and it wasn't just thrown together. There was a purpose behind it, and I think that that's really important to understand when we look at the framework of this argument. That you can make the idea that everything's just random and it's just all this happen chance that kind of get thrown together. But when we look at the efficient cause, there's not just things moving and they're just like billiard balls, like hitting each other and kind of just like bouncing around. Everyone be like, oh, well, there was obviously the argument for motion is like there was a first person who hit that cue ball in order to hit everything else. But this argument is that there was someone who caused that cue ball. There was a purpose. There was a reasoning behind it. It wasn't just inefficient. It wasn't just something that they were just making up. And I think this is so important because when we look at and we understand the framework of God, and we'll get into this kind of when we dive into the other proofs as well. We have 3 more left, so keep your thinking caps on. Is a lot of people can kind of not just misrepresent this, but they actually don't understand these proofs because they don't understand what we would define God as. Okay, their idea of God, they use this like phrase like "you're sky fairy" and all this type of stuff. They use these very like straw man phrases for what they think God is, instead of understanding that like when we Aquinas made this argument, but also Augustine made this argument that God is the highest maximal being, the highest, most powerful being, and he is the prime good. He is the most efficient cause. He's the highest thing. He's not like the gods of the Roman Empire, the Greco-Roman gods, or even like the just any sort of polytheistic God. There's this famous theologian back in the day in the early church. His name was Justin Martyr, and he makes this case because people were calling the Christians atheists. And he says, listen, we're less of atheists because you don't actually believe in a God. You believe in these beings, but there's no prime being. There's just all these beings warring with each other. There's no being that's maximally good. There's no being that's maximally powerful. There's no being that's the highest. You have all these lower beings, and they're just fighting, and you call them gods, but they're not. We have the one God. And in your theology, whatever God, he's talking in the Romans, whatever God is the highest, is actually your God. The other ones are just below him. But you can't even make that claim. You can make that maybe a God at times is more powerful. But if your gods can die, they're not gods. Like if your gods can be harmed, they're not a God. There has to be a maximally powerful being. And so not only is there a maximally powerful being, but we have to, when we look at it from that framework and we go, okay, God is the highest, not just good, he's the highest being. He's whatever is at the top, the tippy top. He's the greatest. That's why there can only be one. That's why monotheism, which means one God, is the only way to really go. That you can't just be polytheistic, believe in all these different gods, because the definition of God is the highest being. One of the definitions of God, the highest final order. And so when Justin Martyr makes this argument, and when Thomas Aquinas here makes this argument, he's making the cause, or the argument of the one who has the initial cause, the highest cause, the highest reason. That's why we need to have God. And so we can see this not only just shown in the understanding of an infinite regress. You can go back. I did this because this, and they did this because this, and this because this, and this because you have to have the initial cause. Otherwise, there's just an infinite amount of causes. And if there's an infinite amount of causes with no causer, there would never be a cause in the first place. There has to be an unmoved mover in a first cause. There has to be a first, someone who made that first initial push. We see this in John 1:3 as well. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. God is the initial mover, but he's also the initial causer. He doesn't just move random things. It's not like he just threw a drum set down the stairs and it just was in a giant heaping pile, or just, tossed an egg against the wall and okay, I did that. No, I have purpose behind the moving that I do. I have causes behind the moving. So that's the first two arguments for the proofs of God. And now we're going to get into the third, okay? The third is an argument from possibility and necessity. I would say this is probably one of the most ones that doesn't appeal as much to our modern way of thinking. But back in the day when Thomas Aquinas was writing this, and people had a very Aristotle way of thinking, a very medieval thought, if we could get ourselves into the framework of the way that they thought back then, this proof would be is very powerful. So the idea is he starts. Oh wait, we got to show Thomas Aquinas. This is Thomas Aquinas, the AI generated Tommy Aquini with Eric, my snake, and he's holding them. They're just chilling, hanging out. I don't know. He's probably got a rat farm or something like that. But they're just chilling, So this is the argument from possibility and necessity. So Thomas starts this argument. And he makes the proposition that there are beings that are there but do not need to be there, or here on earth that don't need to be. And this would be a necessity claim. I'll give you an example. I was born. If I wasn't born, the world would still be here, right? The world it's not necessary for me to be here. And it would be possible that I was never born. That's entirely possible. Now, the world might be different if you watch Back to the Future, all these types of things, but it's entirely possible that if I as a being weren't here, that the world would still go on. There would be a different world, but a possible one. The world is not contingent upon me. It's not based upon my existence, right? So people say, why do I need God before the Big Bang in order to believe something? Why couldn't I just say there was nothing before the Big Bang? Why couldn't I just say nothing existed before the Big Bang and there wasn't? Why is that not a possible argument? And Thomas Aquinas would say this. He said this, therefore, if at one time nothing was in existence, it would have been impossible for anything to have begun to exist. I know this sounds like so simple, like I don't even know how to describe it. Like, it sounds so simplistic, but I've not just seen things online, but I've literally talked to people, and they've made these claims. I did jail ministry for a while, and this was literally, why couldn't there just be nothing? Like, and then there's the Big Bang. And it's almost just like, dude, you're just trying to get out of it, because if you actually like use logic for 0.05 seconds, you would realize that nothing can't create everything. It would have, if one time nothing was in existence, it would have been impossible for anything to have begun to exist. And thus, even now, nothing would be in existence, because nothing springs nothing. You need a first causer, a first mover, which is absurd. Therefore, not all beings are merely possible, but there must exist something, the existence of which is necessary. So there needs to be something that's a necessary being, more than just a possible being. A being that everything hinges upon. And that being is what we would call God. People say, why do I need God in order to believe? Not only do I just look at the way he moved the thing, not only do I look at the way he caused, I look at who he is, and he's a necessary being. And from the framework of necessity and from the framework of possibility, people have this idea that, like, I don't need to be a Christian in order to live my life. No, you don't need a Christian in order to live your life, but there is a necessity for you to rely on everything in the past. There is a necessity for you to rely on everything that's come before you in order to prop you up into your own possibility. That although there are things that were maybe possible, what you didn't realize in the past, you're thinking from your own just limited mindset, which is this: I'm here right now, and so I don't really need anything, forgetting that you needed all of existence prior to you that was necessary to prop up your possibility at all. Those things are necessary for your existence and for the existence of the world. And the modern world has such a hubris. They're just so pompous in their way of thinking. It's like, I don't need nobody to give me any help, except you needed everything before you to help you into your personal, into the possibility of you even being you at this moment. I'm preaching. And it takes just a small pill of humility to go, there are necessities to my possibility. Now, there's a lot more to this specific one I'm not going to get into, but that's how I can kind of distill it down into the modern age. But there has to have been a first necessity. People say, why do I need God? You needed everything before you to come and so everything is contingent upon that something. You can see how these arguments are very similar, and that's why this is all kind of grouped together as one cosmological argument. I'm just breaking these down into specifics. When we look at this, it's so important to look at this not just from the framework, though, of our modern mindset, but to look at from back in the medieval mindset when they were just deducing things with their mind. They didn't have necessarily scientific processes, and they would see this argument, and people would be like, oh, this argument is good enough. I need to see God. Why isn't God doing this? Why isn't God doing this? I used to love this. People would say, like, well, if God was real, why doesn't he do this? And in some sense, that's literally the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, in all due respect. I can't say all due respect and call something the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, but I'm going to do it. Because that's genuinely like, well, if science was real, this would happen. My personal experience has nothing to do. Now, I'm not saying personal experience has nothing to do with people coming to God. That's such an important thing. Having a personal Savior is such an important thing. But just objectively, like, things exist regardless of whether or not I am possible or it makes sense to me. Like Christianity is not like, oh, I'm just going to choose what I'm hungry for that day. It's what is most reasonable, what is most reasonable, and where can I go and place my faith in. Now, faith, I love this analogy I heard one time. When you can get to Hawaii by driving all the way to the edge of California and then you have to take a plane there. You can't drive all the way to Hawaii. And the idea is reason can get us to the edge of California, but it takes faith to make that final leap. But it also takes faith and belief to make a leap away from the idea of God. And so when I look at and I reason, and everybody be like, no, atheism is the lack of faith. It's like, no, because you believe in an eternal universe then. And that takes faith. You have no proof. You have no show me the evidence. Show me the evidence that I can see with my eyes. Show me that evidence. You can't show me that evidence. It's all a priori. We have to make an a priori argument for things that we can't see. Not only just with our reason, but we have to also then put our faith into it. And we're not just trying to fill the gaps as to what we see. We're trying to understand the reality. And these are the most important questions we can ask. People who avoid the questions of God, they're avoiding the most important question, the question of where did I come from and where do I go? Where did I come from, Cotton Eye Joe? That's what they're trying to ask. So that's why we do what we do. And everything has hinged on everything else coming before me. I can't just be like, oh, I didn't need nobody. I'm an independent woman. I don't need nobody. No one's independent fully. You might be able to choose where you go to eat that day. Congratulations. But you didn't ask for that store to be built. That's not, you didn't do any of that. You just showed up one day. And you're like, oh, I'm crying. And then you grew up and you think that you did half this. You ain't done nothing. And our modern mindset says that, oh, we've done it all. We haven't done anything. We're contingent upon the necessity of a first cause and a first motion, and that's God. Let's go, baby. Okay, argument number 4. This is the argument from Degrees. Before we get into it, here's Thomas Aquinas with a donut, a giant pink sprinkled donut. Those sprinkles are put on there kind of terribly by AI, but take a look at this, man. I would get a donut with Thomas Aquinas. Would you? If you would, what kind of donut would it be? Chat, let us know. I would get an apple fritter because obviously that's one of the best. Jelly-filled, a punchki, those are great as well. If you're a monster and you think a custard-filled donut is what you need, we'll pray for you, okay? Okay, we need to cast out some demons. Proofs number 5, argument from Degrees. So here's what Thomas Aquinas says. He defines God, and we define God as there's obviously more to God, and we're not going to limit God, but we're actually unlimiting God by saying God is the highest maximum being, highest being in perfection, highest being in greatness. He is the top, the big kahuna, dude. He is the highest maximal being. And what we can see, he kind of diverges in this proof. I really like this one. We can see that in our life, we kind of grade things on what we'd call levels of perfection. So I see a sunset, and I'm like, oh, that's just the perfect sunset. How do I know if it's the perfect sunset? Well, I know because I've seen other sunsets. I have things to kind of judge it off. If I see a house and be like, oh, that house is perfect for me. How do I know that that house is perfect for me? I know because I've have lived experience seeing houses, and I can relate off of other houses that I've seen, other things that I've seen. I see that pink donut, and I say, that donut is perfect. Why do I think that donut's perfect? Well, because I've seen other donuts, and I've tasted other donuts. So we have this experience where we grade things on degrees. We say that these things exist in degrees of perfection. That we see that there are not just good things, like we can make the moral argument, and I made that at Collision. You can go to youtube.com/WOYouth, go to our Collision messages. You can look where I make the moral argument that you have to have something outside of us saying what's right and wrong. But he even says we can go deeper than that. We're diving deep. I'm going in over my head. I want to be. He's saying we can look at just the way that we just show in degrees how good and bad things are. That would be like, ew, dude, that is disgusting. That's like farther away from perfection, farther away. We can see that there are degrees of goodness. And when we look at God, it says in Psalms 18:30, as for God, his way is perfect. The Lord's will is flawless. He shields all those who take refuge in him. He is perfect. He's the highest maximal being. And all things exhibit greater or lesser degrees of perfection. There must therefore exist a supreme perfection. that all imperfect beings approach yet fall short of. In Aquinas' system, God is that paramount perfection. So he's saying that, listen, when you although God isn't a perfect donut, that's not what we're saying, but just the fact that you can show that there are degrees of perfection show that there has to be there is greater things and there's lesser things. And from our anthropological framework, our human framework, we do this all the time. We'd be like, that was a good threat level theology, PT. That was good. That was like the perfect one. Why would we say that it's closer to perfection? Because we have an understanding as to what a good one is and a bad one is. And sometimes those understandings are subjective. But just the fact that we're appealing to that higher standard at all, just the fact that we're appealing to a standard of perfection at all, shows us that there has to be some sort of, there is a degrees of perfection. And if you just take all those degrees all the way to the top when it comes to the beings of the universe or outside of the universe, because that's the case of God, you will eventually get to the top. And that top one is God, because he is maximally great. Now, this argument for degrees shouldn't be done on its own, because someone could say, okay, well, maybe aliens made us and they're the greatest possible being. Well, we can't forget the other 5 proofs. These proofs don't exist on their own. They have to exist together. So if there's a first causer, there's a first mover, there's a necessity, there's a necessary being, and we look at how we judge things based off of perfection, we just take that perfection up, that is our first causer. That's our first mover. That's our most necessary, or the only necessary being. And this is amazing. This is so powerful, because when even just down to the most like simple things that we do in our lives, just us eating a donut with Thomas Aquinas, what we can do is we can just take in these things and go, wow, Lord, I can judge the degrees of these things because you give me the ability to, and you've done this from the beginning. And I can see maybe not your perfection in this donut and get all teary-eyed because I'm eating a donut, but I in some way am in this framework that you've created of degrees of perfection. And it's just an amazing thing how I can see. And Thomas Aquinas says this: as the thing is said to be hotter according as a thing is said to be hotter according as it more nearly resembles that which is hottest. So I'd be like, oh, that's hotter. Why? Because I understand that there's something that's the hottest, right? Now we're not talking about the ladies, boys, so don't freak out on me. So that there is something which is truest. So whatever is truest is God. Whatever is the bestest is God. Whatever is the noblest, and consequently what is the uttermost being, for those things there are greatest in truth and there are greatest in being. And so he's saying, if there is the greatest donut that you've ever had subjectively, but there's also the greatest truth, the most true thing, that has to be God. And that comes through varying degrees. Now let's look at the 5th proof, argument from intelligence. And he makes this very simply. If there's an end, there must be a reason giver for that end. It can't just be that this thing just falls together on accident. There has to be a reason giver for that end. And with that, I will end with Thomas Aquinas holding homie, my pug, Carl. Oh, he's holding him. And look at that dude. They're just chilling. AI did a good job on that. He made him look really good. Thomas Aquinas says this for this last argument for intelligence. Now, whatever lacks intelligence cannot move towards an end, unless it be directed by some being endowed with knowledge and intelligence, as the arrow is shot from its mark by the archer. Therefore, some intelligent being exists by whom all natural things are directed to their end, and this being what we call God. You can almost kind of make this as to what's called the fine-tuning argument, which is like, we obviously see that this wasn't put together on accident. The fact that we have symmetry in our world, the fact that there's beauty in our world and we can appreciate things, the fact that we see that there is a reason behind some of the structures of our world, that you can get mathematical reasoning. Where does math come from? Where does logic come from? Where all these come from? This is an intelligent move. This isn't just a thing that happens in the universe. This is something that's intelligibly moving towards an end. And if there's a means, if there's a processes, if there's a mover, if there's a causer, if there's degrees, if there's a necessity of being, then there obviously is an intelligent being behind it. And so as we take this in, I know this is a lot. I know this can be kind of like a lot to swallow in many moments, or in a short moment. Short moment. We've almost gone for an hour. I know this can be a lot, but what we can end with is this idea of understanding that God cares so much that he didn't just create the universe like throwing trash against the wall. He created it to have a process, and he's the first mover. Now let's get spiritual here. Now let's pull back in the apologetic and the theology and just know that God is reasonable, and he did it from intelligence, and he didn't do it without a reason. And I think the thing that we can pull out and we can pluck out and we can use as heart knowledge is going, God cares so much that he made me, that he formed me in my mother's womb. I'm not here on accident. And that's why I love diving into these topics, although they might be very heady in a sense. They might be kind of based upon knowledge in a lot of way. We can apply them to our heart and say, God cares so much about me. There's reason behind what I do. There's a purpose behind what I do. And there's a reason why people want to abandon purpose, because they just want to live their own will and their own purpose and their own truth and their own way. But I am not a solid being to base any of my purpose and my reason and my truth off of. I want something higher. I want something to strive for. I want something bigger in my life. I want something more purposeful in my life. And the reason why we understand this apologetic is because it's not just for us to shove down people's throats. It's to actually show them, listen, you live in a world that's devoid of hope and purpose, right? In a world where we have more technology and more stuff, in a world where we have more things and we have more access to everything and intelligence, and we have access to infinite knowledge, it seems. We don't, but it seems our lives are drained of purpose. We don't actually wake up and go, oh, I feel great. We're human. We still have this human component to us. So we have to understand that God didn't just move everything, and he's not absent. He's so purposeful in his plan and his plan for your life and his desire and his love for you. And so I just want to leave with that, and I'm going to pray. And I want to just kind of take this moment and allow God to just wash over you, and you to go, God, I'm here for a reason. You caused me. I'm not just here because of random processes and actions and things that were outside of someone's control, and it's just an accident, and I'm here for a reason. I'm here for a purpose. And what happens in this earth, there's pain and there's evil. And you've allowed this world to keep spinning because you know that there's a greater plan beyond the suffering here on earth. So, Jesus, we pray for everyone who's joined us tonight. Lord, that they will see the purpose behind understanding why you are the first cause, or you're the necessary being. You're the one who moves. You're the one who shows us the degrees of perfection by your perfection. And you're the one who didn't just form this out of nothing, but shows us an intelligence why we're all here. We need that first mover. And I think it's so indicative not just of our universe, but also of my life. That, Lord, you become the first one. You know, I'm reminded of that verse in Revelation where it says you are the first love. Or the church has forgotten their first love. So, Lord, just as you are our first cause and our first mover and our first everything, you are also our first love. Because you loved us first before we were even born. You knew of us before time. Thank you, Lord, that you blessed us with that knowledge and our understanding of you. I'm crying because you're so powerful and good. We love you, Jesus. In your name, amen.